friends, did you miss me? Did you even think of me? I thought of you guys a lot. I thought about how disappointed you must be and how I completely failing you, and you probably didn't even notice that I wasn't here. But it has been 2 months since I last recorded a podcast, so I have lots to share, lots of knitting, lots of yarn, lots of stories if I can get to them. So let's get right into it. Happy knitting season. It always feels like September is the official first month of knitting. Even though I knit all year round, it just feels like there's new knitting energy and inspiration at this time of year. So I hope that you have lots of new cast-ons planned, that you're excited for new patterns coming out, and I hope I can provide a little bit of inspiration to your knitting life. It is Friday, September 7th. My name is Anna and I live here in Alberta, Canada, just north of Elk Island Park, and it is a beautiful fall day today. It was very chilly this morning. It's sunny and clear and smoke-free, which has been a luxury this warm summer, and yeah, it's getting up to above 20 today, so just a beautiful day to be outside, but I'm taking some time to be with you here inside and to show you all my projects. The first thing to share with you is another hat, a simple ribbed Musselburgh hat. I modified the Musselburgh hat pattern. It is worked top down, but stopped halfway through the pattern. And I also modified it to be ribbed instead of stockinette. It is worked up in Woolfolk Far, and that's an Aran weight yarn. It's very soft, and this hasn't been blocked yet, which is why the sewn bind off is rippling like that. But once it's blocked and stretched out to dry, it won't do that anymore. And this little beanie is for my husband who requested it. I haven't cast on another Musselburgh, but I plan to very soon because I don't have a simple stockinette project on the go. That is my only finished object this month, these 2 months. I have done a lot of knitting, but none of them have been completed projects. The first thing is the Kenosi tee, which I discussed during the last podcast. I believe I discussed how I had changed it to be worked flat instead of in the round, but how I couldn't figure out what to do about the lace extending past the end of the front. So the sides of the front are narrower than the lace needs to be in order to get to the length that I want. I could make it a cropped top, but that's not really what I was going for. So I had continued working on that, and then when I couldn't solve that problem, I quit. And I don't know that this will end up being a pattern or not. I feel like the amount of time I'm going to have to spend problem solving, I could have designed a new garment. So I might just end up doing that instead. The other pattern I have worked on is the pullover version of my Gardy Cardi. I did finish, for the most part, except for the sleeves, one version, but I didn't like how the colors turned out. So I left it and actually went and bought new yarn to make a new version. So, oh, that's the wrong side. This is the right side. So it's worked with the wrong side facing you so that you're purling the majority of the stitches. But then you have to turn it inside out. So yeah, it's a scrappy design. You're supposed to use up your scraps. It actually becomes a more fluid transition between colors if you have smaller scrap balls instead of like large chunks like this. It becomes very obviously stripy. Another thing that I didn't really do well on this one is that there's a big chunk of dark colors and a big chunk of light colors, but there's no mid-tones in there. So that's why there's like light chunk, dark chunk. I don't know, I think it's kind of fun in its own way, but I personally would never wear it, so I'm just leaving it as is. I might rip out the yarn. I might just make it into a short sleeve sweater for when I'm feeling in the mood for that kind of garment. But anyway, I knew that the time spent ripping it out wasn't worth it, so I went to the Fibre Nook, which I happen to actually be using their bag for my knit. This is the Fibre Nook in Edmonton. It's just over an hour drive for me, but sometimes we go into Edmonton for certain things, and then I try and pop into that store when I can. And they have expanded their store. It's really an amazing selection of yarn. And so this is the wrong side again. This is my newer version. So again, I'm not using super small scraps. I'm using partial skeins and a bunch of these. It's Sheep G's Metropolis, and it's a yarn I've never used before, but I'm really impressed with it. It's non-superwash, 75% merino and 25% nylon, and it comes in an absolute rainbow of colors. It's 50-gram skeins, so you don't have to buy a full 100 grams. You can pick and choose different colors, and yeah, I've used up most of my skeins of it, but here's just a few of them. So they have like this blue tone that goes from dark to light, and pinks and browns and yellows, and just a real assortment. And Fibre Nook had their stock recently replenished, I think, because most of the colors were there. So I had a fun time going through there and picking my colors. I also had a skein of Whisper and Terra Nova from Smash Knits that I wanted to use, and also a little bit left of Pink Lemonade, which is in that center section. If I remember, I'll put a picture of my yarn before I cast on. This is Terra Nova. So those are the colors I had that I wanted to make work, and so I just took the Sheep G's Hanks little balls that I wanted, that I thought could make that transition a little smoother. So this pattern is a compound raglan that has worked seamlessly from the top down. You start it out flat, you work, you cast on the back and work the shoulders and the neckline simultaneously. Then you get to the sleeves and you stop increasing the body and you start increasing the sleeves. And then at the end you do some other different increases, and then you work the body straight. And I'm just deciding, I need to block it and decide how long I want it, and then you work the sleeves. I think, oh, I have another full skein of this and another full skein of the Whisper, so I will have to figure out how to make these sleeves work. I feel like I'm missing some yarn. I must have put it in a different bag. It might be in this bag. Nope. I'm pretty sure I have more of these colors, but anyway, the last bit will just be this Terra Nova at the end. Yeah, so I've started one sleeve and I'm trying to work them kind of simultaneously, so I'll use another pair of needles and pick up these stitches. Oh yeah, I already picked up this. I actually cut apart this sweater and fixed some of the yoke that I didn't like at the top. This wasn't a very smooth line here, So I cut it and unraveled it and worked it again and seamed it up. Yeah, and I have to pick up the neckline. That was the other thing. I wanted to pick up the neckline and make sure that the shoulders sit how I want it. So this one, I'm not sure what to call it, this pattern. The original was the Gardy Cardi because it was garter cardigan and it was like all garter except for the collar, hem and cuffs. But this one I was going to call Gardy Party based on a suggestion by somebody who follows me on Instagram, but it's not really a Gardy Party. Like, it only has garter here. It will have a garter neckband and it might have garter edgings, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's it. And then most of it is actually just stockinette worked reverse so that you see the purl side. So I don't know, is it justified to call it Gardy Party when there's only like 1/8 of it is actually in garter? If I'm cleared by you guys to call it that, I will. So that one has been taking a lot of my time. I've basically knit 2 sweaters with that design. I just haven't finished them. So the next project I have cast on is a new blanket. It is worked from the center out and has garter starting it, then color work, stockinette, some lace and baubles, and it will go into more lace and stripes at the end. So this is a design I may or may not work into a pattern. It is something I started for my day home lady is expecting in December, so I am making a baby blanket for her. Yeah, so it is in all superwash yarns because I felt that was more appropriate for a baby gift than giving them something that has to be especially cared for. And I didn't use any hand-dyed yarns, so it should be machine washable. I personally would machine wash it as long as you are careful with what settings you choose, and then hang to dry. So I used all these colors. I got these from Statement Junkie, which is my nearest local yarn store. And these are Cascade Heritage Silk, which is a superwash fingering weight yarn, wool and nylon. Oh, it's not silk, sorry, it's just the Heritage one. I have used the Heritage Silk for a design before, but not this Heritage. And that is in the color China Blue. The dark blue is China Blue, and the light blue is Solid Gray. This doesn't look gray at all to me. That looks very light blue. And then I have some Sisu, which is Superwash 80/20. I think it's usually for socks. And it is in the color maybe 2319. It's just like a light creamy white. And I got some baby wool from Sandnes Garn, so that's what these two are. And this one is 2335. And this is a superwash wool. Superwash 100% wool. And this one is 3521. So this is pretty much all I want to knit right now because it's just fun to have things that are stockinette and mixed textures. And I'd like to get it to the point where there's a repeating lace pattern for a good solid amount of time in this dark blue. And then, not this dark blue, this light blue. And then my mom might be able to take it over and work on that, because it gets really slow when there's a lot of stitches on the needles. So as you can tell, I really like these center out blankets. They're just like really rhythmic, and they're a great background project that you can just have on the go while you're working on things with deadlines or, I don't know, smaller items. Yeah. I've knit a lot of baby blankets in my day. I have 4 children of my own, and I have 11 nieces and nephews. And I tried to knit them all blankets. I don't think I succeeded for all the nieces and nephews, but I always knit them something, but I don't know if it ended up all being a blanket. And I typically made up the patterns, like made up the designs. I didn't publish any of them. And I never loved making them. Like, I always wanted a square baby blanket, and then all the ones that I did ended up as long rectangles. So the thing about these blankets is that no matter how big you make it, it's always a square. So you can start it and cast it off and have it as a dishcloth, or you can have it as a baby blanket, or if there's a way to modify it to make it bigger, then you can have it as like a bedspread if you wanted. Yeah, so I really like that about those ones. Do you guys have a favorite baby blanket pattern that you've used multiple times? I know there's a lot of like really beautiful ones that are small pieces that you seam together. I would never seam together a baby blanket, but they're really pretty. I don't know. Is there a certain kind of blanket construction that you really enjoy? I'd love to hear about it. For plans and dreams, there's a couple submission calls that are coming, and probably there will be more and more submission calls in the next little while. Usually September, October, the whole bunch come out, so I'll probably be swatching for some ideas for that. I'd love to do a cabled pullover. I bought this from, actually this is my yarn store that's closest to me, but I often don't think of it as a yarn store because it's actually more of a sewing store. But this I got from is it Cottage Knit or Cottage Crafts in Fort Saskatchewan, and it is called Galway, and it's a Highland Heather, a pure wool. It's a worsted weight, it's made in Peru, and it's just this plain cream color. And I've used it before to swatch and some design ideas, and I really enjoy working with it, and it blocks out really beautifully. So I think it would work well as a cabled sweater. It would be very thick and warm. So I'd like to do that. I have 6 balls of it, which ends up being, there's 200 meters per ball, so it'll be 1200 meters, which should be more than enough for me if I don't make it like an all over cabled jumper pullover sweater. I would also like to do the unspun and mohair held together cardigan that I have the yarn for it, and I've been planning it since last spring, but I just need to be able to find some time to write it up, and then I'll do the sample. So I kind of need to actually do the Gardy Party one first to like settle on that construction and how it looks and that I'm happy with it, and then I want to use that same construction for the unspun one. So that's kind of what's happening in my brain. For shop news, over the summer, the Pure Top was released. Also, the Seed Star blanket was released. The Field Edge blanket was released just today. That's this one. It's another center out blanket. It's worked from the center out with rows of eyelets, and then it ends in this lace, and it's big enough that you can use it as a shawl. Just barely big enough for a triangle shawl if you fold it in half. So that one came out today. Thank you so much if you purchased it. It is 50% off just for this weekend. I'm not sure I'll get the podcast out in time, but if it is before Sunday, September 10th that you're watching this, actually until midnight, September 10th, Mountain Time, that's my time, it will be 50% off if you use the code FIELD50. That's different than what I sent out in the newsletter, but both those codes work. So yeah, the Brooklyn Tweed sweater will be released in October. It still needs a name. I cannot figure out a name for the life of me. I'm thinking mid-mountain pullover because it looks so much like a ski sweater. I'm thinking like, you know how if you're a downhill skier or snowboarder, in the big mountain resorts, sometimes they have a chalet in the middle of the mountain, or they'll have like a set of ski lifts that you can only access once you're in the mountain. So you like take a different chairlift up and you ski down, and then you can get to this other chairlift that will take you even higher. So it's like the mid-mountain is kind of like this secret zone where you have to be good enough to get past the bunny hill in order to go to the mid-mountain chalet and the mid-mountain ski lifts. So I don't know, mid-mountain pullover, does that do it for anybody? If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them too. I don't know why I cannot figure out a name for this design that I've been working on. I think it's just too much pressure because the yarn was provided through Yarn Sport by Brooklyn Tweed, so I just want to do it justice, and sometimes that can really paralyze me in my decision making. For acquisitions, I have a lot. I have a bunch of books and a bunch of yarn. Let's start with the yarn. So this little box of goodness is from a viewer of the podcast. Tina was so kind. She knew that I have trouble with mohair and fuzzy yarn. I react to it. It's very itchy to me, and sometimes I get a rash. She has this Julie Aslin Merletto, which is merino, cashmere, and silk, and she offered to mail it to me, and it is the absolute softest thing. I have 3 skeins of it in this color, which is called Thé Après Midi, which I think is like afternoon tea. And yeah, it's really lovely stuff. Yeah, so I have 3 skeins of it. There is 740 meters in this 115 grams. So that would be enough for a shawl or yet another center out blanket. It's definitely a hand wash though. So not a baby blanket. This summer I had a birthday, and I was able to go away for the weekend with some special friends and family in my life, just ladies. And my sister was able to come up from Minnesota for that, and she brought me a gift, and it is this charting graph paper. So it's knitting graph paper, and it looks like knit stitches. It comes in 2 different knit sizes, so one is a little bit smaller and one is bigger, and it mimics the knitting stitch better than typical graph paper. So she got me that and a set of brand new colored pencils, which I don't think there's just anything better in the world than opening up a brand new set of colored pencils. And notebook, which I use notebooks all the time, and this is a graphing one. So that was so sweet of her to do that, to know me so well. I also got some money as gifts, and I put that towards an Audible subscription. So I now have an Audible subscription, and I would love your knitting recommendations. So not your knitting, your Audible book recommendations. So instead of giving recommendations this week, I'd love to get recommendations from you about which Audible books I should be listening to. I'm currently finishing up Trevor Noah's autobiography, which was excellent. And yeah, I need something new. Also I ordered some books. These are not new prints, like they're not newly released books, but something that I've wanted for a while is the Norah Gaughn's knitted cable Sourcebook, where she just has a whole it's a stitch dictionary of cables. Show you some of my favorite ones. I really like all the littler motifs, like not the big cables. I like the small ones that make little patterns. So I'm hoping to use that to help me design a cabled pullover. And then I got the Vogue knitting encyclopedia, and it's not really because I want to learn things in here, but it's more so to have as a reference guide, because there's just so much information out. So many YouTubers and Instagram and pattern designers all call things different, so I just want to be able to be like, okay, I'm going to call it a sewn bind off based on the fact that Vogue Knitting calls it a sewn bind off. I'm going to call it a drop shoulder because Vogue Knitting says this is what constitutes a drop shoulder. That kind of thing. It's just sort of like a reference book to help me refine my terminology in my patterns so that it makes more sense to more people. And finally, my newest issue of Taproot magazine came out. It's called Harvest, and it's just a gorgeous issue. And it has a knitting pattern in it here by Mary O'Shea, colorwork cowl, and it also has an article about turning flax, growing and turning flax into fiber. It has zucchini recipes, a whole section on all the ways you can use zucchini, which I will definitely be using. I have about 14 cups of zucchini grated in my freezer right now. So this one about flax. Yeah, it's a really great issue for me. It has all kinds of different recipes and harvesting inspiration. So thought I would share that. Okay, so yeah, recommendations. I don't have any recommendations this week, or this 2 months. Who's counting? But if you have recommendations for an Audible book that I should be listening to, please send it to me. I'd love to hear it. yeah, I think that's all the knitting content that I have today. The summer has been very busy. Obviously, we have 4 children in our family, so there's a lot of things happening, traveling, having people visit, all those wonderful things that summer brings. We also had a very short summer this year, again, same as last year, but the school year ended June 27th and it started up August 31st. So we had about 8 weekends in total to use as a family. That made it sound like my husband had the whole summer off, but he didn't. But yeah, 8 weekends, that was it. And there was a lot of smoke, and actually it was quite rainy towards the end. We seemed to get all the rain that everybody else was missing. So trying to battle the weather and the air conditions and try and get outside and do all the things. We did swimming lessons outside, an outdoor pool, kids went to camp, you know, all the things. Last episode I was telling you that we thought our cat might be pregnant. We were trying to get her pregnant. She was definitely pregnant, but we have no kittens and she's no longer pregnant. So we don't really know what happened. That would have been her first litter ever. And we've looked everywhere that we can think that she might have had them and left them behind. Some of those tiny little places we can't get into. So yeah, she could have birthed them somewhere and left them, and we don't know. So that's kind of sad. The kids were a little bit broken up about it, but hopefully Jean Valjean, the cat that the Mr. Tom that came by and did the deed, will come back, and maybe she'll be a little bit smarter next time. And if I can figure out a way to lock her up so she doesn't find a tiny corner under the deck. The problem is that my son is very, very allergic to cats, and she is very much used to her freedom, so trapping her would be difficult. But if I could figure out a way to do that at the last 2 weeks of her pregnancy, maybe she wouldn't just abandon them. Another story is that we went camping, our first and was supposed to be our only camping trip. We got there the evening of the first day, and then the next morning I was making coffee and the coffee perk that I was using broke. It was from the 70s, and I guess those kinds of coffee perks do tend to just break sometimes. The ceramic breaks apart from the metal part that's holding the handle. It broke while I was lifting it up, and it splashed on me and burned and gave me a second-degree burn. So we went to the hospital instead of camped, and yeah, it was really bad. But honestly, it wasn't the burn itself that was the worst part. It was trying to not touch it because it was very high on my thigh. So thankfully, it was still shorts weather. I could wear shorts, but I couldn't like sleep on that side. I'm very much a side sleeper, and I couldn't sleep on that side. I only had to sleep on my left side and trying to like patchwork blankets to keep me warm at night, but keep the burn exposed. And then like sitting, I always had to sit sideways, and drive sideways, everything. All of that like made me crooked, and then I couldn't work out. I couldn't go to yoga class. I couldn't work out in the basement. And like I normally do 5 days a week. So all of that to say, my body was feeling it by the end of the 2 and a bit weeks that it took to heal that up. So if you'd like to see, I will show you where the scar is. I won't show you pictures of the burn because that was quite disgusting, and I don't want to traumatize someone who's maybe had a bad experience. But I'll show you the scar. So this is why I'm wearing shorts for y'all. Oh, I gotta stand up. So that's part of it there. That was the worst part. And then it comes all the way up here. So this is the part where the blisters broke, and the top part up here, I was able to salvage those blisters, and it healed really well. So I might have a scar at the very bottom. It possibly was a 3rd-degree burn, although I think, like the bottom part, I mean the one little part that was especially bad. I think it's hard to get a 3rd degree burn from boiling liquids because they just don't get hot enough, but anyway, it wasn't good. So that was one of our adventures. Yeah, I think that's all I will share right now. That's all I remember about our summer at the moment. Sometimes it's overwhelming when I've done 2 months of not podcasting. My daughter had dental surgery yesterday, so she is home today as well. She's supposed to be supervised for 24 hours. Everything went well. She's just not feeling very good to her stomach, so we're also keeping her home for that reason. So I should get back to momming while working, and yeah, I am excited it's September. Even though this is not my favorite season of the year, I actually prefer spring. As someone who loves birds and gardening, that's when all the life comes back to where I live, and it's a very exciting time. And this is when the time of the year when everything dies and all the birds leave. So I don't love it, but it's hard to hate September when it's chilly at night and beautiful during the day. We've already had our frost, so we're busy with harvest, and yeah, I hope you are all well, and I hope you missed me a little bit. I missed you all. Have a great next month. That's all I'll promise. I'm sure I'll come back in October. Bye.